It's already been hard for the farmers, and if the report from the University of Leeds is right, farmers across the world might have a much more difficult time ahead. I talked about that with Professor Andy Challinor. He led the study.
Well, they're significant in that previously it was thought that a degree or two of warming in temperate regions compared to the current baseline, the current situation, wouldn't change crop yields all that much or might even increase the yields. What we see from the new data is that there are a lot more data than in previous studies, and what we see is that on average, and that phrase on average is important, there will be variation, but on average, crop yields will decrease even for a degree or two of warming. So, we'll begin to see, they're not at the start necessarily very large decreases in yield, but then later in the century, as warming increases, then those decreases are projected to be larger.
Should this sound the alarm? Should governments be worried?
Well, I think governments are aware that climate change is an issue, and that there are impacts of climate change on food security, and that's something that's been known for some time, and we're working through the details. And I think it's very important, yes, to pay to interpret and look at the latest findings and evaluate actions in the face of that.
We just heard in a report here on our broadcast just a moment ago that there are some techniques and breakthroughs that could help mitigate the impacts of climate change, particularly on agriculture. But will this be enough, or are we in trouble here in terms of less food supply down the road a piece?
So adaptation definitely helps. Farmers can change their planting date, maybe the variety of crop that they've grown, and many of the studies that we looked at included those kind of adaptations, and they can help. Maybe if you've got a yield reduction of 10 or 15%, then these adaptations can really help. But there comes a point later on with some of these larger yield decreases, and again in the second half of the century, where these kind of smaller agronomic adjustments really don't seem to help as much anymore, and that's when we're starting to think about needing other kinds of changes, investments in capital, changing agriculture, maybe changing the zones in which crops are grown. We didn't look at those issues in our study, but our study points to the need to look into those issues in more detail and to begin to plan.
Andy, with these alarming pieces of information that you've been looking at, are you optimistic or pessimistic moving forward?
I think optimism and pessimism is a very personal thing, and I think the same scientists can look at the same data, and one will be optimistic because they are optimistic, and one will be pessimistic because they are pessimistic. In some ways, I hold both views. I'm optimistic because I'm an optimist about our ability as a species. We've proven ourselves to be very adaptable, very innovative. It's very important to keep that innovation going. I'm also, in a sense, pessimistic because I just see the scale of the problem, and I see the magnitude of the changes that we expect in yield. We know that there's a growing population to feed as well. We also showed in our study that we expect year to year variability in yield to increase. So there's a question of stability of food supply. It's not just a matter of average or mean changes in yield, but actually a good harvest one year, but maybe a very bad harvest the next, and that variability increasing, and that's very important for planning.
Professor Andy Challinor, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.